Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am here this morning with another episode of Coffee and Conversations. Every other Wednesday, 9:30 to 10 a.m., having great conversations with fabulous guests talking about the things that are most of interest to you. So welcome. And to get us started, I want to introduce our guest. Lauren Waldman is a learning scientist. She's the founder of the Learning Pirate, and she's also the co-founder and chief learning scientist from Island 8. But before I talk about Lauren, I want to bring her in live. And something has happened. Sorry to the recording. Let's just go to Lauren live now. And welcome, Lauren.
Good morning.
That was like a message saying, are we or are we not live? I don't know.
It's because they're listening to us, Libby. They know.
So welcome. I have my coffee. I don't know whether you have yours, but wonderful. So Lauren, I love, so you and I have worked together. I love that you are a credentialed translator of neuroscience. What does that mean, to be a credentialed translator of neuroscience?
It means that I read 1,000 white papers a year to keep up with, which by the way, you'll never do. You'll never keep up with all the research coming out on the brain because there's just so much coming out. But what it means is that I got my credentials, my certifications in neuro and medical neuro, and for the last 5 years have had the utmost honor and pleasure of being a translator to the researchers and the academics and the scientists themselves, whose work probably wouldn't get out into the general public without people like me.
Mm-hmm. And, you and I worked together on a project. You really helped me develop some material. And it's really about speaking brain to brain, isn't it? The work that you do.
It's about working within the operational system itself. So I think when it comes to traditional learning and the way that most of us would have been brought up in an educational system, we were just kind of dumped. We were information loaded. And it really does work against the operational system of the brain, how the brain encodes a memory, how the limits of the sort of the energy and the cognitive load. So when we factor in what we know about the brain and the operational system, which we take directly from neuroscience, and we merge that with the theories and the methodologies that we can get from cognitive psychologies, behavioral sciences, all the human sciences, then we're much better equipped to design and partake in our own learning in a way that works with our operational system, the brain, as opposed to against it.
And this session is so important, not only for what we're going to start talking about, which is some of the research that you've been doing lately around the reintegration of work and making it cognitively and emotionally safe for people to return, but also for leaders on the call today to really understand that, you and I use the word learning like it's, and people hear training because we're also both trainers. Mm-hmm. But this is really about communication at the same time, how leaders need to be communicating to their people so that they're getting it.
Yeah.
And they're coming along.
Yeah, there's definitely, and I guess we can just segue into the research that's being done, that has been done over the course of the last 10 months now. And, this sort of originally started off as my own professional curiosity. So when I design something, I want to ensure that it is going to be most effective for somebody to absorb, to learn, to encode, but that again is working with the brain and not overwhelming it. And what started off as a professional curiosity, when these reintegration programs started to come into sort of the market, and I wanted to see how are they being designed for people to learn, especially in this state where people are exhausted, they're burning out, they're stressed out, they're all the outs. So I want to see, are these being designed effectively for people to actually learn something so that they can safely either, go into a hybrid working environment or go back into the office environment. And what I found was that it was not. And it wasn't about the design of the learning, which it was poor, I'm not going to lie. But what was missing was the true essence of psychological safety when we use that term, which is, are you able to emotionally regulate? Are you able to cognitively sort of monitor yourself so that you're sort of looking at things and going, am I getting too tired? Am I starting to burn out? Am I emotionally heightened? Am I about to react? And there was no sight of it. Yeah. There was no sight of the true fundamental human skills that we were going to need in order to do this in an actual safe way. So that's when the alarm bells were triggered, and the collaboration started between myself, the researchers and the scientists, and my business partner now, Dr. Sarika Cashman.
Yeah. So, so the work that you're doing now, tell us a little bit about that, and what's the impact that that's having on organizations. So the audience isn't necessarily all from Canada, so I won't say here in Canada. So wherever you live, wherever you work from, what can people take away as the strategies that they need to implement or things that they need to consider?
So I guess the first thing to mention is that when I started doing these audits, these were very large organizations, and their programs, their reintegration programs are public. So it was global. When we started doing more research and we started to actually speak to people, it was globally across multiple different industries, cultures, you name it, sectors. We've spoken to thousands of people. What was first interesting was that when we were talking to people and hosting webinars and live events, we were really understanding that the layers of human complexity, because of the experiences that we've all had, they run deep. And so, people they're feeling different levels of safety now. And they've got different levels of anxiety, different levels of burnout, different levels of overwhelm. They've got personal situations that are completely different from one another. And now when we bring this into the organization factor, we've got leaders who either want to rip the Band-Aid off really quick, and and I don't blame them. I think we were having this discussion the other day, and you've got a certain mindset, you've got certain behaviors. And as a leader, it's okay, how do we put into place policies and procedures? How do we get back to business? And how do we do this quickly and effectively? But the real miss here is you're not thinking about the humans who then have to go and implement things, and they've got to work through all of this. So there's a big disconnect between what's being handed down from a leadership level and then what people actually need at a human level, a fundamental human level. So because of that, what we're seeing is, and we trended this about 6 months ago, we could have told you even probably before that the attrition rates were going to start to go up. And the slope has very significantly, and it's trending up again. So right now, I think that's sort of what we're seeing as far as the research goes. The grander scheme of the research are showing numbers that have been absolutely unprecedented when it comes to psychological safety across the world. Like, we don't see percentages like 75% and 80, 89, 98% of anything in that domain. And when we've got people reporting at that level that they have been feeling, depressive symptoms or cognitive burnout, it's just not, it hasn't been seen.
It's, I've worked for a long time inside organizations, and the desire to go to the masses, right? Do sort of, in training terms, I would call it, sometimes we have to do vanilla so that we can reach everybody. It's just not going to work, I think, is what I hear you saying.
It's not. And I think that, where we can give a grain of salt here is that even us as the researchers and the scientists, every time we speak to somebody, we're learning something new. We're just, the layers of the onion just keep getting peeled back. So we've, the largest sort of, if I was going to say what we grouped in, we've got things like presenteeism. You're there, but you're not there. You've got tribalism, because some people never left their working environments and others went home. And now there's a disconnect. Some people think that, oh, you just got to sit and Netflix and chill in your pajamas and jump on a meeting every so often. It just wasn't the case. There's microaggressions, and then there's micro rejections. And a micro rejection is something, I'll give the example. It's whereas a formal sort of introduction to somebody might have included a handshake or going in for something physical. But when that person goes back, the other person is now feeling, oh gosh, sorry. So there's these micro rejections happening that are now, there's so many layers. So, most companies, most organizations, most leaders, they don't have access to scientists like us. They don't have access to the behavioral scientists, and the psychologists across the world are more than overwhelmed. So the reason why we banded together to form Myelinate was because we have the knowledge and we've got the capabilities, and there's just not enough to serve. So like you said, I think they're trying their best at the organizational levels, but this isn't necessarily a problem for human resources or the learning and development teams, because this has to do with brain training. This is brain state training, so that when you come across those moments, you can learn to take a breath or feel it in your body, down regulate in the moment, hear your narrative before it comes out of your mouth in a conference call or something happens. But again, fundamental human skills that essentially none of us were ever taught, but we definitely need them now.
Yeah. And to some it sounds, I don't know, it's pure science, but it can still sound like fluffy, like take a breath. And I don't know the term that you used, but like bring it down.
Yeah, down regulation.
Feel it, understand your narrative. This is language that most leaders in organizations are not used to.
No.
So what are some of the things that can be done to help them get used to it and to understand? So I have to tell this story because you talked about it right off the bat. It's not just the school system. I actually worked for somebody who, in my first meeting, gave me a sponge, a dry sponge, and then gave me the talk about how my brain was just like this empty sponge, and he was going to fill it up. And so I leave the meeting and I have my sponge tucked under my book, and everybody else in the office is like, you have your sponge there? So it was wrong then. It is still wrong in schools to think that children walk into an environment as empty vessels, ready to be filled with knowledge and information. It's not that far off sometimes, not as bad as what I experienced with the sponge, but it's not as off as that is. So getting in tune with all of this, what can leaders do differently?
I say first, try to find people like us. So, we're trying to make ourselves public, but help us find you as well, so that we can actually help. And I think the other thing too is we're seeing a lot still of the top down narrative, and you've really got to really survey people at a fundamental human level, not from the sort of organizational voice, if you will. We've got this and we've got that, and talk to your manager about your back to work plans. And I think that's another for any of the leaders who are listening right now. All of the audits pointed to heavier workloads on the managers, and we're seeing that that's the highest level of attrition right now. Every single one of these plans said, talk to your manager about this, or put together a back to work plan and show it to your manager. Show how you've been just as productive at home as you're going to be. And it was just all roads pointed to the managerial level. And I just looked at it and go, we're in trouble. So really look at the distribution of what is happening across the organization. And I think even if someone is listening to our conversation right now, this is the higher awareness that you need, and to start look into some scientific research. And you can look at articles from Psychology Today. You can look at articles from Harvard Business Review. Most, as many scientists and researchers that can right now are trying to provide the data and the research. to say, listen, the human condition is very fragile.
Mm-hmm.
And I think right now, especially, I think most places thought that we were sort of like seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. But now anxieties are rising again because all we hear about is this fourth wave and variants.
Yeah.
So there is an instability now
Mm-hmm.
in our behaviors, which is already, that instability in behavior is a normal human thing. But now we're on edge because we don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
And the brain likes to predict. It tries to predict everything that's coming. And when we can't, it sets us on edge.
Mm-hmm.
So to our leaders, we just have to understand that business has to move forward, but the people supporting your business need to come first.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the academic settings with the educational institutions I've been speaking to, the narrative is maybe learning is not your first chore. Your first chore here is to make sure that people are okay, but then help them. And if you're going to teach them anything, is teach them how to learn about themselves.
Yeah.
And then move forward.
But leaders can't do that without the education. And as much as I think it's a great idea to start reading Psychology Today and academic articles, it's like,
just call us. We'll help you. We've translated it all for you.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not very digestible. So just,
and for leaders, what they need is to understand how this stuff is going to help move the business forward, how it's going to help produce the, shareholder value, the profits, the whatever it is that the organization is after.
Well, that's just it. If you have a workforce that is, on heightened levels of anxieties, if you have people who are pushing their cognitive loads, higher rates of burnout and stress, they're not producing what they need to do in order to keep your business running.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is when accidents happen. This is when mistakes happen. This is when all of that, sort of tribalism within the organizations happen. So there's so many consequences to the business itself by not helping people learn about these things. And, the more that they can recognize in their days, again, even working hours during the pandemic for some completely shifted because behavior shifted around working hours. So circadian rhythms, things like your sleep patterns, well, that's obviously going to affect things as well. So becoming cognitively strong and emotionally stable to the best of our abilities. And I'm not saying that these are overnight solutions. Okay. This is brain science. We don't change brain instantly. This is a path that needs to be built up to. But before you rip the Band-Aid, and just say, we're going hybrid. Okay, you guys, 3 days a week, you guys stay at home. We'll see you in the middle. Look for these solutions, please. We're literally pleading with leaders right now. Please look for these solutions before you start doing any of this so that people can feel truly safe in their environments.
Yeah. Choice is an interesting thing. And autonomy is an interesting topic because it's talked about. And some organizations do it very well. Some organizations talk about it. Then there's just some organizations that don't talk about it. So it really is walking the talk, understanding, educating yourself, and then educating your people too.
Yeah.
I just have to say, going back to last week's session where my guest was Peggy Kostopoulos, who's a holistic nutritionist, she was talking about the brain-body connection.
Yes.
And things that you can do. So everyone who is listening today has to go back and listen to last week's episode because things like brain fog, which you've alluded to, are real. And there can be strategies in place, but nothing helps with some of these situations that people find themselves in as human beings, as understanding that their body might be craving something other than potato chips.
There's, I think what we learned, and I want to humanize this for everyone. Scientists, researchers, the academics who study neuroscience, cognitive sciences, behavioral sciences, we haven't gone unscathed by any of this. Just because we know a little bit more, it doesn't mean that we didn't have our own downfalls. Mm-hmm. It just means we were better prepared for it and we were able to get out of those ruts faster. But the subtlety of how this can happen, my example, somewhere around, I think, November or December, when, we went into our umpteenth lockdown here in Toronto, I think, 7 million people in this, or, across the province just went, okay, we're done. Right. And I was one of them.
Yeah.
But up until that point, I noticed, and I looked at this now checklist that sort of came out of pandemic, sort of 9 variables of pandemic fatigue. And it was like, have you been going to sleep later? I'm like, yeah. Have you been staying in bed later when you get up? I'm like, yeah. Have you not really been eating? Yeah. I was like the poster girl for pandemic fatigue. Yeah. But it was so subtle. Yeah. It had happened so subtly. So that's why we're saying when we're able to train ourselves to monitor throughout the day, to regulate and continually regulate, we're able to, even if that happens, when that happens, because it does, it's that shift of, at least I know what to do. And what Peggy was saying when it comes to, it's not just about the brain, it's the entire system.
Yeah.
The body, it's the mind. There's research going on right now. I was on the subway the other day here in Toronto, and one of our largest mental health organizations, they're starting to conduct studies on inflammation in the brain as a result of the stress of pandemic. So we know that this is happening across the board, across the world, regardless of, who you are, what you do. Yeah. So now it's time to look into the solutions. But yes, it is a completely holistic view. If you're not sleeping well, your toxins build up in the brain throughout your day. They're just they can't flush out if you're not sleeping well. The cognitive fog that Peggy was talking about, it's 100% a real thing. Yeah. And I think a lot of us have felt it over the course of the
completely.
You want to do something, you want to feel productive, but you just can't sometimes. So this is what we want to help people learn.
Yeah. And people like you and me who live and breathe this kind of work. I'm not in the science end of things, but as a coach, as a thought architect, I can't help think of one of my content partners, Price Pritchett. 2 things: have a goal and manage your thinking. But if you don't know what your thinking is, you can't really manage it, right? No. So being able to understand it first gives you access to more strategies. I love the story. You have to tell it about, I think you were in the UK at the aquarium.
Oh, no, it's in the US.
So,
the US. Yeah, the US.
In the US. So you were having an overload. And so what was the thing that you did? Because I think that was just, it's such a small thing, but it was intentional.
Yeah.
And it moved you to a new state of being. So what was that thing that you did?
So this was about a month ago when I went over to the US. Now, again, situation in Toronto was quite dire. We weren't allowed out for a very, very long time. So reintegrating myself into, what's, I guess, would be a normal environment with more people. It was my first time doing it. And my girlfriend wanted to go to the aquarium. And I thought, the aquarium, how lovely and relaxing. And then we showed up and there were hundreds of people. And as I waited in line, I already knew. I could feel my heart rate accelerating. I could feel the anxiety. I could hear the narrative. I was like, do I run away? This is way too much. Like, okay, maybe you'll be okay. But it really wasn't okay. And being around that many people again in such a tight quarters, most people had masks on, so that was fine, but it didn't matter. You were now in my space. And I basically, so I love jellyfish. Jellyfish are my jam. So I'm like, take me to the jellyfish. And I went to the jellyfish room and I put my hand against the glass and I just downregulated and breathed.
Yeah.
And when you do that, and there's something called buzz breath, and it stimulates your vagal nerve, and it just has this beautiful calming effect. And at this point, I don't care if I'm the crazy lady with her hand against the glass going buzz.
What is it that you do? I'll try it right now too. What is it that you do?
So you take a big breath in, and then by stimulating the vagal nerve, just by making a humming or a buzzing noise. So I'm just going buzz, buzz, and it's tingling here and it tingles the back of, it's all interconnected. And I just did that because that's what I needed to do in order to bring my heart rate down, to bring my body temperature down, and to not get aggressive towards other people.
Mm.
And then remove myself from the environment.
Yeah.
But there was literally, we're going to have now, of course, in the office environments, if you're going back into the office, they're not bringing back everybody all at once. But the lesson learned from that personally, and of course, we're hearing this from research as well, is that if you've been in your own environment, and that environment you're very used to, your brain is used to processing the senses from that environment. And now you go into, even if it's the office is a familiar environment to you, but you're not used to all these people being around you again. And you're not used to the sounds and the everything else that can be walking around you.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain has to process this all over again. And it's coming at larger levels than it is if you're sitting in your living room or in your bedroom or in your office at home.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of energy. I know I'm a broken record when I say this, but the brain is incredibly expensive, and the currency is energy.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And some people are thriving getting back to it.
Yeah.
There are some people who still haven't been in a grocery store.
Yeah.
So It is really all over the place. So leaders, you really need to educate yourself. So I want to give people an opportunity to know how they can get in touch with you. Just before I turn the slide, in the final iteration of this 3-part series, which I'm now calling a 3-part series because I know there's 3 parts, of really talking about the brain connection. This has been the human condition. Last week, we talked a little bit about Peggy and the brain-body connection. And my next guest on August 25th, I believe, is Jill Hewlett, who will take us through a little bit of brain fitness. Mm-hmm. So some of the things that you can do, and it speaks to your jellyfish story, the self-soothing, and other simple movements to create new neural pathways that aren't anxious and stress oriented. So look for information on that. But let's go to how to get in touch with you. So most people know me, and my information is above my head there. But Lauren Waldman, Learning Pirate, I just love that. So here's her information. While we have 3 minutes left, talk about what you do as a learning pirate, because I think that's so cool. It's what caused me to work with you. I needed somebody to help me sort of jazz up some material that I had in this horribly flat world of Zoom meetings. And it worked super, super well. And I thought, who else would be better to help me than somebody who calls themselves a learning pirate?
I think that, learning has always been, that's what I do. As a learning scientist, that it's a different realm, bringing the brain into learning itself and then the design of learning, which is incredibly new in the industry. But the pirate, I think, when you're going to revolutionize something, sometimes you just got to get your voice out. And, I love sort of the whimsy of the pirate and the adventure and the searching for treasure and, all of these new discoveries. And that's really the brain to me, is bringing all of this new discovery, all of this new adventure, but also shaking things up a bit. We got to revolutionize, and the time is now. So that's where the spirit comes from.
Awesome. So if you are a leader and you are looking for the research and science and the education on what to do for your people to make sure that you've got safe and productive workplaces in the future, then you need to speak to Lauren. And if you are a learning professional and you've been doing the same old thing on Zoom for months and months and months, you need to talk to Lauren. So all paths lead to Lauren.
Yeah.
You all know how to find me. All paths for thought architecture and managing your thinking. Feel free to get in touch with me. So Lauren, thank you. It has been an absolute treat. And I'm actually not sure whether we made it. We're on Facebook Live right now, but I don't know if we ended up on LinkedIn Live. So if we weren't, huge apologies to everyone. And this will be posted in no time flat. So thank you again, and have a wonderful brain connected day.
Thanks, Libby. You too.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.